Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. I am very excited about today's episode, and we are taping this episode on January 3rd. And I think it's appropriate that this is a New Year's episode because so many people have New Year's resolutions and goals. And I'm sure many of the people who listen to this podcast have a goal, a wish to get a book published. Somebody has told them at some time during their career, you should write a book, and you want to, and then you don't. So today we have a guest who is in the publishing business, who'll be able to talk about how to move from wishing about writing a book to actually getting a book published. And so my guest today is Mark Combs. Mark is in the middle of a lifelong love affair with the written word. So it's no surprise that his life's work has centered on books. For decades, he's helped authors bring their ideas to a wider audience by helping them craft the best book possible. Mark has worked in all facets of publishing, from sales and marketing to editorial production, as well as all genres of book publishing. He's worked for trade publishers, academic publishers, and most recently, K-12 professional development publishers. And it's here in K-12 publishing that Mark has found a home. Mark knows that writing a book is a solitary endeavor, but he also knows that publishing that book is a collaborative venture. Publishing is an arcane industry, and an author needs a helpful guide through the process. Mark works with his authors to peel back the mystery behind the publishing process so his authors are better armed to promote themselves and their work. You will recognize many of the books and authors with whom he's worked at his website, Murmur, Muration, authorservices.com, and that will be in the show notes, as I said. But some of the authors he's worked with, Doug Lamont, Patrice Bain, Tom Sherrington, Zach Rochelle, and Gene Tavernetti. He helped on both of my books, Teach Fast and Maximizing the Impact of Coaching Cycles. So let's meet Mark. Good to talk to you this morning, Mark. As I said in your introduction, you've been involved with a lot of authors, a lot of successful authors, a lot of authors that people will recognize when they go to your website. And what was your, one more time, what was your website again? Your new website?
Yeah, this might spur a conversation here, but Murmuration Author Services. So it's MUR, oh boy, Nation. authorservices.com.
And you know what? I'm glad you did that because that's how I cut it out of the introduction. I'm going to have to edit it out, but we will have it in the show notes so people will get there.
Yeah, it's a little long-winded. I probably should have thought of something a little shorter, but
well, they'll be able to see all the familiar authors and familiar books that probably on many which are on their bookshelves. But kind of let's start from the beginning, Mark. How did you get involved in publishing?
English lit major back at university, in college, and just kind of fell into publishing that way. Really just a love of words, and the written word really has just kind of carried me through my whole life. I started off with a small trade publisher in the sales department, and I was their national account manager. So I'd call on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Borders back when it was still around, and also called on all the distributors that you may or may not be aware of, Ingram, Baker & Taylor, those book distributors that distribute to the independent bookstores. I also ran our export business as well. So we had distribution partners in the UK, South Africa, and Australia, English language countries. So I worked with them, as well as going to some of the international book fairs and helping out our rights person take overflow meetings on when we sold the international rights to our books at those fairs. So a little bit of everything. And that's one of the nice things about working for a smaller publisher, is that you get to wear a lot of hats and you get exposed to a lot of different things.
So English lit major, excited, love of books,
That's
and
it.
now you're gonna go to now you're gonna go sell them. Now
Now
you
you're gonna
have to.
sell them.
And so, what other roles that you have? And kind of other the reason I'm also wondering about your background is because I know one of the names that will be familiar to everybody is Tom Sherrington. And I was reading after I had already known you. I go to the last chapter, and he gives you your due about how you got him to write his first book.
Yeah.
So what were you doing? How did you,
Yeah. So I
sorry.
did the sales thing for a while, but again, part of that, kind of circling back to that, one of the other hats I wore was a member of the Acquisitions Review Board. And almost all publishers have this to one degree or another, where there's representatives from a variety of different departments come together and decide which books they are going to actually acquire and publish. And I was a sales representative for that. And that's what really got me started on the whole editorial side of the publishing business. The idea of working with ideas, again, as opposed to selling them, right? So I did the sales thing for about 10 years or so, and then I went and worked for a higher ed publisher, calling on professors and working with them to write textbooks basically for their course and supplemental text for their courses. Did that for a few years. Fast forward to, I was approached by a recruiter for a company in South Florida who was looking for a publisher to oversee their publishing department in a professional development services company, right? So that's what got me to Florida and got me into professional development. And it was there that I met Tom Sherrington. Kind of circle back to that. I met him at a conference. I think some of your listeners will know of Research Ed. And I don't know how many years ago that's been now, 5 years or so. I met him at a conference and went to one of his sessions, and he was presenting on Rosenshine's principles in practice or in action. And I thought, boy, that'd make a great little book. So I approached him after the conference and said, you ever thought about writing a book about this and put this in? And he said, no, not really. But, he was keen to do that. So we quickly kind of threw something together. Basically, he had it all written because he was already presenting on it. And thus sprang Rosenshine Principles in action. And now we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of the thing.
So how much is a unicorn? How much of a unicorn is Tom Sherrington that a publisher approached him and said, I want you to write a book? And I'm thinking about all these people in the audience who want to write
Right.
books. Should they be expecting somebody to knock on their door and ask them to write a book?
In this space, it's not uncommon. And in fact, it's where I find most of my authors is that I either find them via social media, I follow them, I read their blogs, I listen to their podcasts, I go to their sessions at conferences, and they've got something interesting to say or something that's a little bit different, right? And so I would much prefer to find my authors that way by approaching them as opposed to what we call, manuscripts that come over the transom, those kind of unsolicited manuscripts that may or may not really fit into what you're looking for or fit your style, right? Because every publisher has a little bit different view of the world, and you want to make sure that you're presenting the right topic and what's the right word, the right kind of wavelength to that particular publisher, because everybody has a slightly different take on things.
Okay. So, well, I met you because I had written my book, Teach Fast, and I was looking for a publisher. And people who know me won't be surprised when I say this, but because I'm so smart, I didn't ask for a lot of advice. I just did stuff. And then after the fact,
Sure.
tried to figure it out. So when I met you, I had already, for the most part, written the book. And I thought that's what you did. But how should people get started? And if Mark Holmes doesn't approach them,
Right.
how do they get started writing the book?
Yeah. By starting writing the book. I think people get intimidated by the concept of I've got to put down 50 to 75,000 words, and how am I ever going to do that? I've got a full-time job and two kids and a dog and the whole thing. So you got to find time to write, and you got to write the book. It doesn't mean that you have to have it finished before you start approaching a publisher or, start, for lack of a better word, shopping the manuscript around, but you want to have a pretty good start on it and at least have a very good understanding of what that book is going to be about, the structure of it. That said, I've certainly worked with authors, again, typically authors that I've approached that haven't written it. Have you thought about writing a book, Gene? And no, I really haven't. So then it's the kind of creation process between you and I. Let's see how we can kind of formulate this idea into a coherent book, and how should we structure it. And those are the kind of books I really like working on.
So how does that work? I know that, again, when I was looking for a publisher for my book, I would see the publisher's guidelines, and this is a guideline for a proposal. And gosh, for me, it seemed pretty daunting because I didn't have a protocol for it. I
Right.
had an outline to do that. How important is that if you're shopping a manuscript?
Having an interesting idea that doesn't have to be 100% unique, right? It could be a side idea to something, but yeah, you have to have some sort of hook, some sort of idea. That said, the writing is important as well. And that's going to vary a little bit by publisher. Some publishers are a little bit more forgiving on how clean the writing has to be, and some will want it to be absolutely perfect because they don't want to do anything with it. They want it to kind of come in and they'll do a little light copy editing and then publish it. So it's a little bit of both. But if you want to weigh the scale, you got to have a decent idea, because the writing can oftentimes be cleaned up. But again, that said, again, the writing has to be at least passable, right? So that the publisher doesn't have to do too much work and invest too much time and energy into cleaning up the writing.
All right. So if someone wanted to start a book, your suggestion is that they start writing. Um, how much structure is, well, let me back up a little bit here. Many of the proposals that we see say they want to know where's your table of contents, what's in every chapter.
Right.
And is that pretty standard? Is that
That's fairly
something I
standard. Yeah.
should know?
Yes. It may feel like I'm kind of equivocating here because every publisher is a little bit different. And that's part of the problem with publishing. It can be very arcane, and, what one publisher does, another doesn't. My acquisition process is significantly different, I think, than most traditional publishers, where you do send in that 13-page proposal with comp titles and your marketing plan and the whole rigmarole. My approach is much more interactive. I want to talk to you. I want to find out about who you are. Can I work with you? Because I like to work with my authors and develop the ideas that they've come up with. And are you open to editorial suggestions? So it's more of a relationship building kind of a thing, as opposed to a transactional type of situation, which you would find in a traditional publisher. I'm not sure if I answered your question there.
Well, I'm going to expand on what you said, that you like to, develop a relationship, and that's why I liked working with you. And because the relationship goes both ways,
Right.
I have to, when I send you something that I've worked on and you have it edited, I have to respect you. I'm not going to argue about everything. And a little anecdote, when my book finally did get Beyond You, which was, I don't know if you knew this, but our editor, Anders, who we worked with, he always complimented you. He says, when I get a book from Mark, it's in pretty good shape. So that means we had a chance to develop a relationship and do a lot of work. But the other thing that was so interesting, when I did get the book to the publisher, or to the editor, there were a couple things that had been really problematic for me that I didn't know how to figure out. And when my first call with the publisher, within the first like 3 minutes, he said, I hope you don't mind. I switched your introduction to chapter one because and that was the exact problem that I didn't know how to figure out. And that experience just got it done, and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. So I agree. I think that relationship is very important. I have always respected, when people have given me feedback. Do you ever have you ever been sorry that you accepted a book and then you started to work with somebody and
Yeah, I mean, we've all had those kind of first dates that go really well, and then you go out to dinner and you go, I'm not sure what I saw in her when we had coffee, because it will happen, but not very often though. And then you can usually work through it in a kind of a professional manner. It's just it's a little bit work than you thought it was going to be, and then sometimes life intervenes too. I mean, yeah, one of the questions or one of the things we'll talk about early in the process is, are you dedicated to doing this? Because writing a book takes time. And it's, as I often tell my authors, it's butt in the seat, fingers on the keyboard. That's how books get written.
Yeah.
And it's not some muse that's going to, like a lightning bolt strike you in the head and you're just going to be able to crank out this book in a weekend. It's going to take some concerted effort on your part to get it done. Do you have the passion for the project in order to get it done?
Yeah. Which brings me to another question that people always wonder about. They always hear in the movies, I've got a deadline, I got a publisher,
Mhm.
a deadline from my publisher. Well, are those hard and fast, or the story on those?
Again, I'm going to be a little wishy-washy, and if any of the listeners take anything away from this, is that publishing is a morass, and every publisher is slightly different in how they approach these things. Some are going to be extremely tight on those deadlines. I've worked for publishers that have slots. Your book is going to be June 2025. If you miss June 2025, it could be another 6 months before we have another slot for you, right? So you got to get it done. Most are a little bit more flexible than that. They'll publish 7 books in June instead of 5 or whatever, right? And then they can make it work. But always be respectful of that deadline, because the publishers has got a forward vision, right? They're starting to line things up based on that due date. They're starting to schedule their copy editors, their design people to start working on the cover, all based on that due date, because that's kind of the trigger for all of that. So nobody's going to come to your house and repossess your car if you don't get your book in on time, probably. But be respectful of that deadline. And
Thinking about
be
yeah,
upfront. That's
yeah.
something that when you initially sign with a publisher, make sure you have a good understanding of that and be honest with them. I'm not going to take a sabbatical for 6 months and I can get this done. Or no, it's going to take me 18 months to get this done. Be honest about that time schedule for yourself.
Well, one of the things that I remember you telling me is the publishing is hurry up and wait. Hurry up and
Yes.
wait. I
Yeah.
know I've talked to a friend of mine who just finished a rewrite of one of his books, and he said, "Yeah, it should be coming out in mid 2026."
Right.
That how it's not immediate is what I'm trying to say. So what's a general, if again, this
Right.
might be wishy-washy, but what's a general timeline for getting a book written? You talk to somebody and they say, "Yeah, I'd like to write a book." What would be a good rule
Yeah,
of thumb?
I would say within a year of the manuscript being submitted, a clean manuscript being submitted. So now it's in the process, right? Now it's in the pipeline, in the production pipeline. I think a year is probably pretty reasonable for most publishers. The ones I've worked for turn around much quicker than that, much faster than that, usually within 5 or 6 months of that clean manuscript coming in. But again, it really does vary. They will, if it's a book they really want and it's timely, what's called in the business is a trend book, a book that talks about a topic that's super hot right now, they might move it up a little bit faster too.
But it's just a little bit faster. I mean,
Yeah, and there's only so much they can do, right? Yeah. But yeah, they can maybe get in a couple
yeah.
months if they really put the pedal to the
Well,
metal. But
I think that's one of the biggest surprises, I think, for new authors is that just how long it takes. And then there was an additional, I don't know if you remember this, Mark, but there was an additional issue with my book. It came out, it was being worked on during COVID.
right,
And then we had the supply chain issue, and the books were coming from Great Britain, and it took
right.
forever, and you never knew when it was going to arrive or where it was. It was so it always takes longer than you think, I guess is the
It always
bottom line.
does. Yeah. Yeah, the
Um,
distribution pipeline always catches a lot of first-time authors. You know, the publication date is when the book is released to the public. It's not necessarily when it's going to be on the bookshelf or in Amazon's warehouses, right? Now we are now shipping it out to Amazon's warehouses. That
yeah.
takes a week. It takes them a week to receive it. It takes them another 4 or 5 days to fulfill the order, whatever, right? So we're talking some time here before the pipeline gets filled up and people are anxious because they pre-ordered their book and they're where is it? The publication date was 2 weeks ago. How come I haven't got my book yet? Well, that's one of the reasons why.
You know, the one of the big surprises for me was, well, I always had a goal to write a book. Always had, oh, you write a book, I write the book. Oh, isn't this great? And then, holy cow, I got to sell it. How, what's that process like? What advice would you have for people with regards to marketing, or just how does that work these days?
I'll confine this to the professional development space, seeing as that's what we're talking about here, and it's what I've been doing for the past 10 years or so, is that unless this is really a passionate project and you something you really want to do, you probably should have some sort of platform in order to kind of promote yourself and your work. By that, I mean you're doing whatever you're writing the book about, you're probably already presenting in schools, or maybe this is something that you oversee within your school. You're the special education teacher at your particular school, and you come up with an idea on how to some sort of pedagogical approach that you think would work well elsewhere. So you have some sort of platform that people can gravitate to and that you can kind of self-promote yourself. That helps a great deal, certainly in the professional development space.
So, what should they expect from well, I was going to say, what should they expect from a publisher? But there's another option now, I think that a lot of people are doing, and I think that's a space that you're involved in, is
Right.
self-publishing, supporting authors who want to self-publish, or just supporting authors in general. So, what's your thoughts about self-publishing these days
Yeah,
versus,
self-publishing's changed quite a bit since it first kind of came on the scene, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The options for an author are quite good now. But you do have to understand that self-publishing means exactly that. You are now publishing the book yourself. You're doing all the things that a publisher would normally do, or you're contracting with someone to help you with that, right? Editing, layout, cover design, finding out how you're going to distribute the book, how you're going to market the book yourself. All of those things are going to fall on your shoulders now. It's not insurmountable by any means, again, because the systems are much better than they used to be. It's certainly doable. And of course, your compensation is going to be considerably higher because it's only your mouth that you're feeding now, right? As opposed to a big publisher who's got a lot of departments to kind of keep moving. So it's certainly doable, but you have to be willing to take a little bit more work. And so you probably want to partner with somebody who can at least get you most of the way to that. And the biggest hurdle typically is getting a good quality book published. That's copy edited, that's laid out right, that's formatted well. So the quality of the book really does matter the most, more than anything else, I think.
when I talk to people who are thinking about, self-publishing and this whole everything that we've talked about, I always emphasize the support that I received in the editing, the copy editing, the whole that whole piece. I mean, I was to the point where I'm going back and forth. I've written paragraphs so many times. There's one word that I can't decide on, and I'm driving myself crazy. I need somebody to help. And I think that would be, if I were to self-publish a book, I think that would be the biggest thing that I would be looking for, people that are competent and that had experience in doing that work.
And knows the space, that professional development space, or whatever space you're publishing in. If you're writing a romance novel, you're going to want to find an editor who's worked on romance novels in the past and who understands the marketplace, what the marketplace is looking for, can also help you with, you're stuck on some sort of thing, and that editor's probably read a research paper about that and can maybe kind of point you toward that and kind of get you thinking about something a little bit different, or something like that. That can be an aid to you in your writing. So I would be very leery if you're an education writer, you want to write an education book, going with some of those kind of mainstream trade self-publishing firms who aren't going to have a very good understanding of the content, right?
And then after that's done, then you're still stuck with the marketing of the book, whether you had it self-published or you had a publisher.
Right. And that's where having that platform comes in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you can, it sounds a little capitalistic or whatever. I'm not sure what the word would be, but you can think of your book as a marketing piece in some ways. It's calling your calling card. This is what I do. This is what I talk about. And it doesn't mean that's the only thing you do, but you probably are going to find a slot that you're going to fill, right? You're an instructional coach, right? That's what you do, Gene, right? So here's the book, and this is how my approaches are. And that's a good way to kind of introduce yourself as well as a leave behind. Say you're working with a school that's got 150 teachers or so, there's 150 book sales, right? You just kind of work it in with your presentation. So everybody gets a leave behind with your book.
And the other thing,
And, to back up a little bit, again, the distribution aspect of self-publishing has improved greatly in the past, I would say 5 to 10 years, where that hurdle via Amazon and some others, they make it fairly easy for you to kind of upload your book and make it available to the general public, somebody who's just kind of browsing on Amazon. And there's different ways that you can do advertising on Amazon to kind of promote your book. And again, working with somebody who knows all that stuff is helpful as well. But that's something you can learn, and you can get your book out there to just to kind of the general public as opposed to just selling it directly to schools.
and a more technical question here that I had thought of before. So if you self-publish a book and okay, you get all the ISBN, you get all that technical stuff done, the copyrights taken care of, should be taken care of by the company that's helping you self-publish. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So where do the books actually go? You get them printed, and now I've got a contract with Amazon or, an agreement that, oh, there's my book, they can buy it through Amazon. So what happens? Do I have to continually ship books off to Amazon or how's that work?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to be wishy-washy because it depend. It depends on what you want to do. You can take those files, your book files, and go to a printer and print 3,000 copies and keep them in your garage if you want. And you can be your own distribution center. That's certainly one way to do it. But then, you've got to have boxes and mailing and et cetera. What I would recommend doing is finding a service, and there's several of them, that do the distribution for you for a fee, right? They're going to take a cut of every book that you sell, but they'll do probably print on demand, and print on demand has gotten considerably better in the past decade or so too. Almost indistinguishable from offset printing. Offset printing is when you do a big print run, 7,000 copies on a regular kind of printing press, whereas print on demand is just done digitally, just kind of one at a time. And then there won't be any inventory for you to have to worry about. You haven't, spent $10,000 to print all these books. You're printing them as you need them, and they will distribute them for you. That's the route I would go, probably.
And that's part of the services that you provide now is assisting people in making those decisions.
Getting those things set up. Yep.
Yeah, because those are the things that, to quote Seinfeld, there's always a guy. There's always a guy who could do it.
Right,
You don't have to do
right.
it yourself. If you think you have to do everything, it becomes too big,
Right.
I think. So
Subject matter expert, stick with what you know, right? My dad always told me that. Never be afraid to hire a professional. And I'm not. If I need somebody to work on my car, I find a guy who knows what he's doing, as opposed to me trying to figure out where the water pump is. Right.
yeah, is there, and I think you've kind of talked about this, not directly, but you find somebody wants to write a book, or you've talked about it. And is there anybody who shouldn't write a book, who says, boy, I want to write a book? And have you talked to them and you recognize that right away?
That's exactly right. That's why I have, and you remember this, I have what I've termed a discovery meeting with my authors. And you can think of it as just a cup of coffee and talking over, you and I over a cup of coffee, talking over your book idea. Is this a guy I can work with? Is this guy passionate about this project? Because I often work with first-time authors, and they're, I'd like to write a book. That'd be kind of cool. And well, no, we're talking 7 months of hard labor here to get this thing done. Are you passionate about this project? And you really can only tell that, I think, by talking to somebody. Other people that shouldn't write a book. And I often find that in those discovery meetings.
One of and I was so excited when, I finally signed a contract and like I was like many authors, I shopped it around a little bit. And the first question that people ask me, oh, what was your bonus? What was
Right,
your
right.
signing bonus? What's the reality of that situation?
Those are quite rare, certainly in professional development. The Doug Lamavs of the world will get an advance, but also keeping in mind what an advance is. An advance is an advance against future royalties. So they're just prepaying you your royalties. It's not a bonus. It's not, although some authors in some other genres might get a signing bonus, that's extremely rare. I mean, you were talking James Patterson, J.K. Rowling kind of things, right? So I would worry less about an advance and focus more on the royalties they're going to pay you and go at that and attack it from that angle. Look for a graduated royalty scale. The more books you sell, the higher percentage you should earn from that. Also look for how that royalty is structured. Is it on net sales or is it on cover price? Makes a huge difference, right? So I would attack it from the royalty standpoint and try to negotiate as strong a royalty schedule as you can for yourself, as opposed to saying, I need a $5,000 advance.
And again, how does somebody find out about
That's
that is
part of
the
the agreement process. So if I were to come to you and say, yeah, we want to publish your book, here's our publishing terms. And that will, and in those terms, the royalty schedule will be laid out. And as an author, I would come back and say, I think we can do better here. I need more than 10%. I'd like to maybe start at 10%, but if I sell 5,000 copies, I want to be 15% after that sort of thing. And publishers are kind of coming around to that too. It's a little bit more of an incentive for the author to help market the book. So again,
go ahead.
no, I was just saying, people get hung up on advances. I wouldn't, because again, it's advance against future royalties. It's not free money. It's just money you got early.
Well, and another thing is I was looking again at your website, and I had been talking to you about, self-publishing another book with another group that I'm working with, and taking a look at fee structure to do all that work. That's something, if you're with a publisher, they're just absorbing.
Correct.
And you don't realize it. In some another way to look at that is I just got a $5,000 advance because they did all this work.
Right.
So in other words, don't get hung up on that.
Right.
Don't expect that big advance.
And to kind of piggyback on that and maybe even circle back to that deadline, keep in mind that the publisher is spending all of this money before they make a dime, right? They don't make any money until that book is sold. So they've got to pay an editor, a cover designer, an acquisitions editor. All of those things are front loaded into your book, right? Before they even realize any money. So it's not like, then they're taking a bit of a gamble, right?
Yeah.
Not all books will pan out or sell as well as they hoped. So have a little sympathy for your publisher too.
Is there something that I should have asked you, or something that you would like to share with folks who have a goal to write a book this year or get started writing a book?
Yeah, if you're looking to write a book, get going, get started, and set a schedule for yourself. If it means getting up at 5 a.m. before the kids get up and go to, you got to get them off to school, and it's only a half an hour, and be amazed at how quickly a half an hour can turn into, I can sneak another 15 minutes or 45 minutes here or there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But get yourself into a writing schedule. And I think that's the biggest hurdle most authors have, is just building that writing discipline. There's going to be days where you've got the flu, but you got to get 1,000 words down.
Yeah.
And it's not all glamorous, but it can be done. And
Yeah.
a lot of people have done it. Do the work.
Do the work. Do you have a question for me, Mark?
I'm always curious as to how my authors feel about their experience. They're publishing, what sort of thing opened their eyes or was open to them. Like, oh, I didn't expect that.
Well, I've talked about a couple of things, but before I talk talk about specifically and answer your question, I want to give you one more pat on the back. And I would recommend that if anybody is going to, in this new year, think about writing a book, get to your website, which will be
Murmuration. Yeah.
murmurationauthorservice.com and have a cup of coffee with Mark, a virtual cup of coffee, because don't be out there by yourself. If you don't know how to do it, you don't know how to do it, and talk to a professional.
I
So
appreciate
that
that,
would,
Jen. And,
yeah.
to emphasize that, I love talking book ideas. So yeah, even if it's kind of in its infancy, your ideas in its infancy, let's chat. It doesn't cost us anything other than 50 or 20 minutes of your time.
And I really get something out of it. So for me, experience, again, I had two paths going. One, I was doing the work, and I was also learning about the business at the same time. And I tried to offload all the learning about the business to you. Again, it had to be somebody that I trusted, that I was going to move along. But as we talked about during during our chat here, had the goal, I want to write a book. I want to write a book.
Sure.
Then here comes your book. And now I want to sell the book. I want to
Right.
sell the book. And then, oh, it's not enough. So that was my experience. So my experience was wonderful up until the time it got published. And I wasn't even thinking about marketing before that. And I think it was my experience, I don't want to say it was too late, but I think my sales haven't been what I had wanted them to be
Sure.
because I didn't think about the marketing side. And now I see, some of my friends and acquaintances, they're doing what I should have been doing. Their book coming out in 6 months, and they're promoting it every day and working. So that would be the thing that I learned in this experience, which gets me to think about, if I were to do another book, because I'm always thinking about writing another book, would I go self-publisher route,
Right.
given given what I know now, and given that I am not J.K. Rowling, or I'm not
Right.
one of these guys, I'm not going to be selling a gazillion books. And how do I navigate this mid-level existence?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Again, having a little sympathy for the publishers, right? They publish a lot of books and they only have so many resources, financial resources in order to promote those books. And all books get promoted. Don't think that we're not going to do anything with this book at all. But everybody's budget's going to be slightly different based on what their expectations for that particular book are. And of course, just the way the curve works, right? There's going to be 20% of the books that do really well, and they're probably going to get a little bit more marketing support than those mid-list authors who are probably going to have to kind of have to plow their own field in a lot of ways. They'll get marketing support, but they probably won't get as much as I've never met an author that said, boy, they keep throwing money at me. They're over marketing me.
Yeah.
And that's even the top tier authors, right?
Right.
No author ever thinks they're over promoted.
And that's funny. I was surprised. I met somebody recently, and we were talking about this, and I was very surprised to hear that from this author. I thought, my goodness,
Right.
but it's everybody. Mark, it's always a
Colin.
pleasure talking to you. And I always wanted to spend more time with you when we did
Yeah,
have
this
a
has been
meeting
great.
and to chat. But the problem was it was all business before. Now we
No,
just
it's
had a
fun.
chance to chat.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so thanks, Mark. And I think this was a good service for a lot of folks.
I hope so.
All right.
I
Thank
always
you.
appreciate talking with you.
Yeah.
Always a blast.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused, Adaptable, Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles. Talk to you soon.